Hi everyone. Instead of a lecture for this lesson, I figured I'd do something a little bit more YouTuber-like. So today we're gonna do an unboxing. Cue historical music. Now, this is not really a box. What this is actually a piece of old-timey luggage. And let me tell you, you try taking this to the airport filled with stuff. There's no wheels, you have to carry it, and this little plastic handle would oftentimes break. Not the best thing, but it's got a cool embroidery on the front of it. So this is gonna act as our box. We're gonna pretend that this is the first time that I am seeing these articles as I unbox them, but in reality, they're my artifacts. Now, as an aside, they're all from the 1960s, with the exception of one. So the first thing that I see in this box might be a little bit familiar to you guys. So I'm gonna hold it up. It's the Canada flag. But miss, what does the Canada flag have to do with the 1960s? Let me tell you. In 1964, Lester Pearson decided that it was time that Canada changed its flag. Up until this point, Canada had been using what was known as the red ensign. This flag was relatively unique to Canada. However, during the Suez Crisis, the Canadian peacekeeping troops were often confused for British soldiers, who were not exactly favored by the Egyptians at this point in time. So Lester Pearson made it his mission to try and change the Canadian flag. And so in 1964, he initiated a commission to try and create a new Canadian flag. This was the end result. However, how did they get here? Well, first they had a Canada-wide competition. So they asked people from across Canada to submit some options. So I'm gonna put some on the sides here so you guys can see the kinds of things that were in the running to be Canada's flag. In the end, there were 3 options that were going to be the end result. And a commission had to vote on these 3 options. Pearson really liked his Pearson pennant, as you can see up here. Now, the Pearson pennant had 2 blue stripes and 3 leaves in the middle. Blue stripe from one ocean to the other ocean, 3 leaves, 3 coasts of Canada. In the end, the commission went with the red maple leaf, which is this flag here. The red maple leaf was submitted by George Stanley. George Stanley's submission was pretty close to what you see today, except the maple leaf was slightly different. The symbolism was to be from sea to sea, and of course, this maple leaf in the center was a Canadian symbol for many years and had been representative of Canada even in the First World War. However, not all provinces in Canada actually have maple leaf trees. So you can see how some provinces might have had a problem with this. The red color was meant to symbolize St. George's Cross. The white color was meant to symbolize the fleur-de-lis from our French history. When the flag was unveiled on February 15th, 1965, I had mentioned to you that the maple leaf in the center was actually kind of different from what George Stanley had originally submitted. The reason is when they put the original version of the maple leaf up onto a flagpole and let it fly in the wind, it was very hard to discern that maple leaf in the middle. And so they actually refined the way that the leaf looked like to what you see today. And that's how we got our Canada flag. The next thing in our piece of luggage is a catalog. What's a catalog? A catalog is basically a shopping collection. So think about those catalogs you might get around Christmas time. Maybe when you were a kid, you would circle in the catalog the things that you wanted for Christmas from the toy section. Well, this is a catalog for Eaton's. Now, you might be familiar with this company. Eaton's, as in the Eaton Center, used to be a department store, similar to like the Hudson's Bay Company that you see today. And so you would go to Eaton's and you could go to the store and you could purchase these items from the storefront. However, in Canada, because there's a lot of rural communities, not all communities had access to a mall or access to an actual Eaton's store. And so Eaton's and other department stores would send out catalogs like this, where they would put the products that they have to sell inside of it. And so you could go through this catalog and see what the items you wanted to purchase. And you could then send in an order form and order it remotely. So it's kind of like a little bit like Amazon, except you had to go to a location where you'd fill out a form and you'd write in the product code and you would send it in and they would mail it to you. And so you could get clothes from here. In the catalogs, you would find all kinds of things. Everything from shoes to underwear to record players to television sets to furniture to lawnmowers, you name it, it was probably in a catalog. Catalogs, of course, went out of favor with the internet. Let's have a look what else we have in here. I'm going to give you guys the first look. It's the Beatles. You guys have probably heard of the Beatles, I hope. Now, the Beatles are not a Canadian band. However, they did come to their popularity in the 1960s. Along with Elvis Presley, who was very popular in the 50s and into the 60s, the Beatles and Elvis were the start of fandom culture in this time period. So girls would buy their records, would go to their concerts, you would hear them screaming for these celebrities. They would get chased in the streets if they ever went out in public. So we start to see teenagers starting to have financial power. They're using their money to spend on celebrities. Now, what about Canada? Well, Canada had a guy named Paul Anka. Paul Anka at this point in time was a teenager and he became a heartthrob. His song Diana rose the charts and he became an instant celebrity. In the 1960s and 1950s, this is where the idea of a teenager really starts to develop. Prior to this point, teenagers didn't actually exist. The terminology didn't really exist. You would essentially finish school and get married and have kids. But after the war, kids were going and getting educations. They were going to places like high schools. They were starting to stay home a little bit longer. And as a result, they got jobs. And those jobs might have been in the local diner. It might have been at the local movie theater. And they now had disposable income. So what are they going to spend that disposable income on? Think about it. Albums, t-shirts, concerts, whatever they wanted to spend their money on, they'd spend it on. Let's have a look what's next in here. Do you have any guesses as to what this might be? If you guessed camera, you're right. So what you would do, first of all, you would wear this around your neck. So we'll put it around my neck. You'd wear this around your neck and, oh, I have it upside down. That's probably not wise. So you put this around your neck and you would take it on vacation with you. It was far more portable than previous cameras before this time. And it allowed you to now commemorate the locations that you saw and the places that you visited. Now, how would you go about taking a picture in this? Oftentimes when I show this camera to students, they don't really know how it works and they always put their eyeball up to here, but that's actually not the right place. This is actually where you would see how much film you have left. Because in the days of film, you only got like 24 pictures in a roll of film. So you had to use your photos wisely. But no, you actually would open up the flap at the top and you would look down. So I'm gonna look in this and I can actually see you. So hello. And then I would take your picture by pressing this button. Let's keep digging into the box. It's a piece of luggage, miss. I meant our piece of luggage. Passport. Now, is this a passport that you would take to the airport? Nope. This is a passport for Expo 67. In 1967, Montreal hosted the International and Universal Exposition. Now try and say that 10 times fast. What ended up happening in order to make it bilingual is they actually shortened it to become Expo. And what would happen is you would have countries from around the world would set up a pavilion, and at that pavilion, they would try to showcase anything that was technologically advanced or in line with the theme. Expos still take place around the world, and their purpose is to demonstrate solutions to global challenges that are occurring at that point in time. So in 67, there was a lot of technology that was happening in the world, and so countries took that as an opportunity to showcase how they were technologically advanced. And so things like the monorail, which went all around the circumference of Expo 67, were considered to be very forward thinking. At one of the pavilions, they had an escalator that went up to the various floors. This was considered to be technologically advanced. So people would travel to Montreal, and it became the most successful expo of the 20th century. Now, when you went to Expo, you would be given one of these passports. What would then happen is as you went to the different pavilions, you would then show them this passport and you would get a stamp. And that stamp would commemorate all of the different locations that you actually went to. So as you traveled across to the various pavilions, you would get a stamp in your passport and you could collect them all. In order to create the space needed for the expo, the Montreal government decided to build 2 new islands in Montreal. And in order to accomplish this, they used dirt from the subway tunnels that they were digging in the city. So now in Montreal, there are 2 islands where the expo was once held. Do you know what this is? If you've ever gotten your photos developed, this is what they put your photos in. So the pictures that are inside here, these are pictures of some pavilions from Expo 67. So have a close-up look at them. Look at how amazingly constructed that they are. Now imagine what they were like in color. All right, let's keep going into the luggage. Do you know who these guys are? Pause the video and see if you can identify what their names are. I'll give you a hint. They're all prime ministers. We'll go from left to right. Over here, this one is Pierre Trudeau. So that's Justin Trudeau's dad. Next to him is John Turner. Then that's Jean Chrétien. And far on the right is our prime minister of the 1960s, or for part of the 1960s, Lester Pearson. Now, this is an interesting postcard. Is it interesting because there's all prime ministers in it? No, it's not because there's all prime ministers in it. It's actually because of Pearson appearing in this photograph with Jean Chrétien and Pierre Trudeau. Now, they're all liberals, so that's kind of the thing that they have in common. It's probably why they're in the photo together. But Pearson in the 1960s started to see that there was a rise of nationalism in Quebec, and he needed to do something to start to curb that rise of nationalism. And he needed to really understand the problems that were affecting Quebecers and French Canadians. And so he brought into the Liberal Party and recruited Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau was one of the 3 wise men. These 3 men were meant to help Lester Pearson truly understand the plight of the French Canadian population in Canada. And as a result, it led to legislation like the Official Languages Act, which made French an official language of Canada, thanks to Pierre Trudeau. Let's see what else is in here. Do you guys know what this is? So I'm going to turn it and it will give you a better sense of what it might be. So if you look in the corner, you're actually going to see the name of the artist. You might be familiar with their name because that is Michael Jackson's family. His family was originally a part of a group called the Jackson 5, where they sang some very famous music. This is what's known as a 45. You could buy these for very cheap at your local record store. So what you would do is you go to your record store, and whatever the most popular music was, you could find it on a 45. You would get 1 song on the A side, 1 song on the B side, and that was it. But it was very inexpensive, and as a result, teenagers had loads of these. And so what they would do is they would listen to the most popular songs using 45s. Now, have you ever heard of the term flip to the B side? That's in reference to the 45. Typically, record studios would try to put what they suspected to be the most popular song to be on the A side. And then whatever they thought might not be as good, but they could get people to buy, would be on the B side. But sometimes the B side might become more popular than the A side. But in this case, the A side was definitely more popular than the B side. On the A side is ABC. On the B side is the young folks. Which one are you more familiar with? How about we see what this is like on a record player? This is up close of the record player. And like I said, this is a 45. So we want to make sure that we change the little notch there to 45. Otherwise, it's going to sound like a bunch of chipmunks that are singing. But you're going to notice that it's actually not stabilized here. Well, the record player came with a little knob that you can put inside to stabilize it. So now it no longer moves. So we're going to turn it on and we're going to bring the needle over. Now you have to be very careful because if you accidentally scratch it, you're going to ruin your record. So you're going to bring it as close as you can to the edge and you're going to drop the needle. We're going to stop it there because we don't want to be demonetized. As if we're monetized. And that's how a record player works. All right, next in our piece of luggage here, we have another postcard, except this postcard is of a car. This is a 1969 Buick Skylark. Ooh. Now, you'll notice how massive this car is. In 1967, Lester Pearson negotiated the Auto Pact. Prior to 67, Canada was experiencing a trade deficit when it came to automobiles. And so they needed to make a change. The Auto Pact led to the creation of branch plants where the plants would create 1 car for all of North America. And as a result, it led to more cars being manufactured in Canada. Prior to the Auto Pact, 7% of automobiles were manufactured in Canada. After the Auto Pact, 60% of cars were manufactured in Canada. So yeah, as you can see, the Auto Pact was a good idea. Let's see what else we got in here. All right, this is our last item. So this is the Centennial flag. And if you have a look, you can actually see the dates of the Centennial on the bottom. So in 1967, which is coincidentally the same year that Expo was taking place, we held our Centennial. This was our 100th birthday of Canada. And this was the official logo of the event. Now, as a result of the Centennial, all kinds of events were taking place across Canada. In particular, a lot of locations were renamed Centennial or some sort of variation on that to commemorate the 100th anniversary. So what they would do is they would rename a lot of different landmarks. Things like skating rinks, streets, parks. Can you think of any parks or streets or arenas that are named after the Centennial? That was because of this event. One of the things that they did to celebrate the Centennial is they had a train that went across Canada, and inside of it, it actually had a moving museum. So when that train arrived into your part of Canada, you could visit this museum and see the different parts of Canada just within the train. So there would be historical items in there would be cultural items that would be in it, and it would give you a good sense of how people across Canada actually lived and the history of our nation from 1867 to 1967. So that concludes our unboxing. I hope you had fun. See you guys soon.